In the previous video, I added, I don't know. Hold on.
Absolute shit f***ing video. Look at this f***ing compression. Embarrassing. And listen to the f***ing mic quality.
Tools or miscellaneous items that don't need.
Absolute shit.
Alright, moving on. In my previous video, I added a bunch of features, and recently when I was working on it, I realized how poorly the game performed. So to fix it, I decided to switch the game from the high definition render pipeline to the universal render pipeline.
Took you long enough.
The universal render pipeline doesn't have volumetric fog by default, and as you can see in HDRP, I was using volumetric fog. So in order to keep that fog in URP, I found a really good free and open source plugin on GitHub, and I also am using Unity 6, which is very helpful because Unity 6 has a feature called Render Graph, which lets me see, and pretty much lets me see the order of all of the render features. The other reason my game was using HDRP was because my game is inspired off of Lethal Company. Basically, in the game you will collect loot, and then at the end of the week, you'll feed your stored items to a beast. In the previous video, I added the inventory, and more recently, I tried to make it more lethal-like getting rid of the offhand, first off, and I also added items that are too big to fit in your pocket, like the box. Speaking of the box, I made an equipment system, which basically means that the player can find the box, open it, and unlock the watch. As you can see, on the top right of the menu is the actual radar. On the left side is the console, which logs all of the positions that the radar has found, and then at the bottom right is the stats viewer, which basically just tells the player a bunch of stats about themselves. As you can see, the scan line for the radar looks quite a bit different from the PNG I was using before. That's because I'm using a shader. Now, originally the radar actually used an iterative approach. Basically, this means that the scan line is duplicated every frame, and then that duplicated piece of it is faded out slightly. Now let me tell you, that performs really poorly, as you can tell by my 46 FPS. And that's why now we're using a shader. The next feature I added was calories. Basically, every item has a amount of calories that is randomly generated between a min and max, which means that even though these two upgrades are the same, they are worth different amounts of calories. Now, I got a little sidetracked and added a stamina and health system, as you can see at the top right. When the stamina goes all the way down and you keep running or jumping, it begins to deplete the health. And then when the stamina regenerates, it cannot go up past the current health. A problem I often have is I spend way too much time making the game look nice rather than working on the actual code behind it. Thankfully, at some point I had a moment of clarity and decided to add the quota system. Pretty much, the player can find an item and then grind it to add to the quota. Since the quota system is implemented, that also means that the calorie system is done being implemented. So the next thing I wanted to work on was making the game more immersive. Now this is not immersive. So to make my game more immersive, I wanted to add camera shake and view bobbing. And, well, I was originally using Cinemachine, but the Cinemachine camera shake isn't customizable within a script. Anyways, the camera system works in layers. The first layer rotates the camera based on the player's input. Then we have the core, which is just the camera, which is free to shake within the outer layer. I can also make it shake up and down to simulate view bobbing. The final feature I added to the camera was banking, which basically means that the player's camera leans in the direction that they're moving. Now listen to this real quick. Do you hear that? There is nothing. Absolutely no sound. Somehow, this entire time, my game had absolutely no sound. So, I made a sound manager script that allows any other script to call the play sound method so that they can play sounds like, for example, the footsteps. Also, for increased immersion, I added ambience with its own volume slider because I always hate it when games have ambience that I can't turn up. With audio ambience, I wanted to add some more visual ambience. So, I added snow particles. Obviously, the reason it's snowing is because it's cold, but the reason it's cold is because there is no sun. The name of the game, Solacuna, actually stems from sol, the Latin word for sun, and lacuna, which means gap or empty space. With all of these features added, I felt my game was looking a lot more like an actual game already. So, if you liked the video, let me know by leaving a comment or a like, whichever you prefer. And if you want to get notified with any future uploads, hit subscribe, and then I think it's now a drop down. Hit that drop down and select all.